Welcome to the R3 podcast. I'm Reverend Dr. Elliot Robinson, where we look at race, religion, and rhetoric through the lens of misinformation and disinformation. Well, on today, our topic is one that I think is timely and one that is necessary. It is simply this: will white people settle for racism? Yes, that's the question. That is where we are as a country, whether or not white America will settle for the racism of this current administration. I want to begin by talking about what the purpose is of a white supremacist group. Why that? Because right now our country has several that are moving about as wolves in many ways in sheep's clothing. One of those is a particular movement, which is white Christian nationalism, which is masquerading as a religious organization, a religious sect within Christianity. And the other, if we're being quite honest, is the darling of the GOP and MAGA, is Turning Point. Has basically adopted a lot of the rhetoric of white Christian nationalism, which in many ways is just white supremacy. And so let me begin by giving my definition of what the purpose of a white supremacist group is. It is simply this: to manipulate the financial and political exploitation white people experience from white lawmakers, white corporations, as well as the wealthy elite, and then by redirecting white anger and betrayal away from exploiters and turning it into rage against minority groups. I know that was a mouthful. I'm going to say it again. The purpose of a white supremacist group is to manipulate the financial and political exploitation that white people experience from white lawmakers, corporations, and the wealthy elite by redirecting white anger and betrayal away from the exploiters and turning it into rage against minority groups. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the purpose of a white supremacist group. Their goal is to scapegoat other groups that literally have no actual impact on what white people are experiencing, but are less likely to be able, in the minds of those who are lifting up these groups, they are less likely to be able to defend themselves. They are easy targets. They are easy marks. One of the many things that white supremacist groups do is they never address the source of the exploitation that white people are experiencing because, drumroll please, they are actually funded by the exploiters. There, I said it. They are funded by the corporations. They are funded by the wealthy elite. And in many ways now, in this new basically come up of politics, funded by lawmakers. So their job is actually to further the exploitation of white people. In many ways, they are the ultimate race traitors. So yes, white supremacist groups are actually race traitors because they do not lift a finger to address any laws, any policies, or any economic reality that are actually exploiting white communities. You do not see any of these politicians, any folks in the administration, any white Christian nationalists, or MAGA influencers who are speaking out against the policies from the big BS bill that have gutted everything from Medicaid to Medicare, insurance subsidies, veteran services, public health, natural disaster relief, science research, reduction in higher ed access, as well as the tariffs that have gutted farmers and are causing the literal collapse of some states in the Midwest. Those flyover states that the administration is so quick to pull out when they want to drum up fears of race and fears of blacks and fears of roving packs of blacks. Those tariffs that are from this administration are literally destroying the Midwest. And yet white supremacist groups, they're silent. White Christian nationalism and the white Christian nationalists who have suddenly just come to full-throated, full-bloated mass racism are in full support of every policy of this administration. Why? Because that's their job. Their job is not to bring forward the policies of Jesus Christ. Their job is to support and place a religious lens on the policies of this current administration. So really, white supremacist groups and white Christian nationalists, which are in that subcategory, they are complicit in class warfare. And they sell white people on this notion that in the newly plundered and exploited society, their reward will be to sit ahead of the other ethnic groups. That's it. That's their reward. You get to sit at the front of the pack of those who are exploited and plundered. And so that's why I have the question for today. Will white people settle for racism? White supremacy feeds off the myth of white equality. The myth that all white people are in this thing together. Just one big happy white clan, pun intended. This is despite some communities in our nation that have experienced generations of economic exploitation at the hands of white people. Let's think Appalachia. Let's think the Panhandle. Let's think the coal miners. Shoot, let's think the Bible Belt. And currently, even the farmers. So this is despite laws, policies, and now political force that ensures an economically segregated and rights-restricted society for potentially generations to come. They still sell the myth of white equality. The job of white supremacist groups isn't to help support white people, not one damn bit. Their job is not in securing what they have lost in the BS of the big BS bill or any other political policy. Their one job of a white supremacist group is to make white people settle for racism. White Christian nationalists are quick to invoke the founding fathers when they attempt to justify the U.S. being a Christian nation, but they are radio silent as the current administration ignores, defies, and just tramples, and let's be honest, defecates all over the Constitution. In fact, they treat the Constitution and the rights that are given in the Constitution with literal disdain and disgust. The goal of white Christian nationalism, even though they want to prop up 1776 all the time as we prepare for 250, but that's not their goal. Their goal is not to have a rights-driven 1776 society. Their goal is a seat at the table of empire as this empire dismantles America. A true nationalist in the American context would be 100% against any form of authoritarianism, any form of dictatorship structure, because they would look at the founding of this country and they would realize it is in direct opposition in the founding of the country against the British monarchy. And they would view that as being the point of departure. But instead, what you're hearing from white Christian nationalists all over the place, because they are complicit with authoritarianism and they are complicit with this administration, some would say they want a dictator. And then they go one step further, giving allusions of the New Testament. We would even take a Caesar if it means ushering in a Christian nation. If you are a nationalist, that would be the last thing that would come from your mouth, is having a dictator over the nation. A true nationalist would want states' rights defended at all costs, because that is a primary function of this nation. The founding fathers wanted to ensure that each state would be able to sit upon itself and then work in conjunction as a collaboration of states, but not to have the states fall under the thumb of a single unitary aspect of governance, which is why we have the three branches: the executive, the judicial, and the legislative. And this current administration wants to basically level it out to have one branch. That cannot be any more against what the founding fathers of this country wanted and what they envisioned for this country. They would also be completely against the military invading other U.S. states. It's literally against the law. It's literally against the whole premise of the founding of this country. But again, there is no regard for what it means to their people. White supremacists want all white people to believe they're there for all white people, but they're not. They're only in it for themselves. And when I say them, the ones who are at the very top of the food chain are the only ones who they care about. Everyone else is just a means to an end, a framework where they basically create their own cult of personality, where they are the ones driving the ship, and they use fear, and they use fear mongering, and they use racism, and they use bigotry to make people feel as if you are not on board, you are a traitor. You are a traitor of the race, Meanwhile, they are the biggest traitors of the race because they do nothing to change the actual condition of the people that they are luring into their trap. The job of white supremacy in general and white Christian nationalism in particular is to make white people and their micro target of white men in particular to feel as comfortable with losing all of their inalienable rights as possible, so long as the others lose more of their rights. So again, I want to close by simply saying on today, the purpose of white supremacy is quite simple. Manipulate the financial and political exploitation white people experience from white lawmakers, corporations, and the wealthy elite by redirecting white anger and betrayal away from the exploiters and turning it into rage against minority groups. So we'll ask the question again. Will white people settle for racism? I hope not. Because if you don't settle, we can in fact still save America. Reverend Dr. Elliot Robinson with the R3 podcast, where we look at race, religion, and rhetoric through the lens of misinformation and disinformation. Take care. Have a great day.